We're focusing on the period from the late 40s through the end of the 60s. And I've got a quote here from Arthur Bryden. "There was a deathly quality to Canadian theatre following World War II. Miss King was one of those who helped breathe fresh air into it." Now, forget about where it came from or anything like that. What could he possibly have meant by that? By about the deathly quality of theatre?
Well, there wasn't any theatre. I think that's fair to say. I think when the war broke out in 39, and even before that, there really was very little theatre, indigenous theatre, or indigenous companies. There was a tremendous amount of work coming through the Royal Alexandra Theatre, had great theatre companies coming through. I mean, we'd see the Lunts once a year in different productions. We'd see all of Catherine Cornell's stuff, all the touring. It was a touring house, and so we saw some wonderful people come through. So that, I think that's what he meant. There was nothing, during the war we would get things, like, well, we're still getting stuff from New York during the war, but we would get things like, the Navy show and the Army show and that sort of thing would be about the only Canadian stuff that was done.
Tell me more about the Navy show and the Army show at all, do you remember?
I don't know much about them except that they came through. And they were, in fact, like made up of people who went into either the Army or the Navy, and it was an entertainment corps connected with the services, you know.
Do any names come to you?
Wayne and Schuster were the Army show, and I think it was like a big review is what they were like. And in the Navy show, I know that Barbara Chilcott was in it. She was a dancer in it, and John Pratt was one of the leads. He did that "You'll Get Used to It" song as a sort of sad sack sailor, tar, whatever. But they came through. I don't think I even saw the Army show. I did see the Navy show when it came through. And it came through to the Royal Alec. But what we didn't get were any little theatres, which are really what make up Canadian theatre at the moment,
Rather than spending time denying it, you helped breathe fresh air to the stage. Could you please tell me how?
No, I can't tell you that, because I really don't know what he meant by that. I certainly was part of a group that started theatre here in this area, and that's all I can think that he meant. I don't know, when did he write that? I don't think it was at the time. But there was a group of us that came out of Hart House Theatre and out of the university, basically, which opened up right after the war. And they brought in Robert Gill from Carnegie Tech and the Cleveland Playhouse, and he was put in charge of Hart House Theatre. And so he taught a whole raft of talent that happened to be there at that time. And that went on and on and on, but I think it was, there were a number of people who were back from the war at that time, so that the campus, which had been fairly small during the war, just exploded after the war, and every classroom was overstuffed with people. All the desks were taken and the people were sitting on the floor, sitting on the stairs, but it was an extremely exciting time because you had sort of not a generation difference, but maybe a decade difference for the students. Some were in their 30s because they had the, what do you call that, where the Army pays for you to go to the university. And well, never mind. But so that it was a whole bunch of people who were more mature, who'd gone through a lot of suffering in the Navy or in the Army, in the Air Force, and had seen an enormous amount of life and death, and they came back and to begin their lives again, to build again, and so the energy that was going on at that point was incredible.
We know about the Hart House in its previous incarnation. Do you know what it was before it was a theatre?
Well, in the 30s, originally it was built by the Masseys for the University of Toronto as a recreation area and creative area for the students at the university. And it was quite wonderful. When I was there at the university, women were still not allowed into the area at all. You could go in escorted, for dinners and for dances and swimming meets, things like that, and to the theatre. But you couldn't just breeze into Hart House. They can now, and that's wonderful.
You mentioned from Robert Gill's team.
Yeah, sorry,
Paul,
can you do this one?
What?
The last question?
Yeah.
So that noise goes through the
mic. You heard the noise, right? The door? Yeah. Okay. Why don't we hold for a moment, please, and sure. We'll just roll it, please.
5, 4, 3, go.
You told me that Mr. Gill came up from Carnegie Tech. Could you tell me the story about how he came up? Were you around when he came up, and who was this guy, and what was he like?
I think they wanted to open up the Hart House Theatre and open it up to all the colleges and faculties of the university. So I suppose whoever they would be, the board that would be looking to fulfill that job, must have questioned people from all over. And there obviously wasn't no one from here who had that kind of experience. And so they got this man from Carnegie Tech, and I know he played the Cleveland Playhouse, and he directed at Woodstock, New York Theatre and so forth. He was an actor, and been an actor in Broadway, and a director, and I'll tell you, he was a godsend to us, who were lucky enough to work with him.
Did he have a lasting influence on you?
Yes, he did. I think he gave me all the foundation, and not only me, but everyone else that I have worked with since, from that period of time. He gave us not only the technique, I think the most important thing he gave us was the possibility that you could make a living in this business, that we could, other people could, of course, and that was accepted in Canada, that other people, generally someone from other countries, could do that. But for us, as young people starting out with, he believed that we all had talent, which was incredible, and he had faith in us, and faith in our ability to go beyond what had been laid down for us. It was a very, very exciting time. Then above and beyond that, he was able to give us theater technique, professional ethics, an enthusiasm for all the literature of the theater, and all methods of acting, from Japan, China, Europe, America.
When I run some names by you from the Hart House period, you just might give me an reaction. Jane Mallet?
Oh, she wasn't at the Hart House Theatre when I was there. She was from before the war, in the 30s, sometime in the 30s, as was Andrew Allen and Judith, God, what was her name? Who later went on to New York. But that was a company that worked at the theater in the 30s. Then it was closed down during the war, the theater was.
And Dora Mavor-Moore?
Dora was not at Hart House. She was basically on her own, and I was part of, she had a thing called the Village Players, which eventually emerged into the New Play Society. And I was part of the Village Players too, and that was sort of She had a barn. No, I've got a barn. Oh yes, we put on plays. She had a barn up Bathurst Street, and behind her house, and there was a theatre in there, and we did all kinds of things there. So she would teach and acting, and then she would have a group of people, and they would do plays. I know I did scenes from Brecht's The Master Race, and what else did I do? Oh, I think I did some Irish plays there. And when they did a transition and went in from the Village Players into the New Play Society, which played at the Museum Theatre, not Hart House. And the first play of that was Playboy of the Western World. And I was in that. God, I can't remember what I played. But one of the girlies. And that was great fun.
Speaking of Shaw, Charmion King as Saint Joan invested the role with an emotion in the best tradition of Sybil Thorndike. Could you react to that quote?
Well, Sybil Thorndike created the role originally, and so I suppose that's what it was, and that's very nice. It was a great part. I don't think you can fail as Saint Joan, frankly, because it's a brilliantly written part. So if you say the lines, you're ahead of her. You could build a nice reputation on it, though.
One-woman show, in a sense. Kind of carried it.
No, it isn't actually. The fourth act, Saint Joan isn't in it at all, or Joan isn't in it at all, and it's brilliantly written. It's three men talking, arguments.
Do you owe anything to anyone for your ability to have played that?
Gil cast me in it, and that was the opening play. And actually, they had opened the auditions to everybody on the University of Toronto campus, and I had I was always trying to play to audition and trying desperately to get the young women in shows. At the University College, we did a production of Our Town. I tried terribly hard to play Emily. Well, I played Mrs. Gibbs. Then the next thing that we did the next year was Arms and the Man. I went in, same director, Vincent Tavel, and I said, "Oh, come on, Vince, let me audition for this." He said, "Well, all right, no, that's fine. Now, when you're finished, I'd like you to read Catherine." Who cares? So I said, fine, okay. You know, the other girls would come in, and so then I'd say, well, okay, maybe I wasn't just perfect today on Raina, but let me come in tomorrow and read for it. So he said, fine, that's fine, thank you. And then, would you mind hanging around, though? I mean, just as a favor to me, and read Catherine with the other people who come in? I played Catherine. So by the time St. Joan came on, 14 years old, I thought, oh, well, no way. And not only that, I'm not a big girl. I'm 5'4", and I was slight at the time. And, I thought, oh, I'll never get this. So I didn't even bother going up for it. Well, the actress who did get it had some problems that she had to leave the cast after about the first week and a half or so, and Gil had come to see Arms and the Man. So he said, would you come in and read Joan for me the next day after you'd seen it? So I said, sure. Why? I mean, but I thought, oh, well, he's mad because I didn't come and audition for it, and fine, I'll go and do that, but then he can point out why I can't play young women. And anyway, so I did, and I got it.
In '49, you became an original member of the Straw Hat Players.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Well, that came, again, through Gil, because Gil, after Saint Joan that year, there were only two plays done at Hart House. Joan and Oedipus. not Oedipus Rex, but it was the cocktail version, I think, of Oedipus. At any rate, Gil was going down to Woodstock, New York, and to be a director there, and they have a very large apprentice system down there. They have a sort of equity company, and then they bring in stars, and then all the Joe jobs are done by apprentices. Now, and the apprentice system was quite large at that time in the United States, and some companies they would pay to be in. This you didn't have to pay, but you weren't paid either. You know, you just were there learning. So 8 of us were taken down by Gil to Woodstock, and when we joined about 20 other people, American kids from varying colleges and stuff, and after the first week, there were only about 3 of the American kids left, and us. The others were very bored. You know, it wasn't there was no guarantee that you'd ever get on the stage. But in the equity thing, you were allowed 3 parts, and so that's how we worked there. But what we did learn was every element of the theater. You know, how to make sets, how to stage manage, how to do lighting, how to do costumes, assistant director, or meaning sitting beside the director, but never mind. You know, all of those things, all the elements of the theater. So one night, towards the end of that summer, Don Davis and I were sitting on the curb of the main street of Woodstock, and after one of the shows, and I'd had an offer to go to New York. One of the agents from William Morris had come up and seen me in Joan of Lorraine, actually, and I wasn't playing Joan, I was playing the stage manager or something like that. And at any rate, he was very keen that I go to New York. And Frances Bavier was in the company, and she said, "Oh, you're too young." Cute. And so I was debating what to do, and I said, "I really don't want to. What I would really like to do is start a company like this. Why couldn't we do it? We're as good as 3/4 of the people who are in this company, and the stars, you know, we wouldn't have that, but we could do this." And Don agreed. And so then he spoke to his brother, Murray, who was in that company with us. And so we met at their cottage after Woodstock that fall. And we drew a circle around Port Carling, which was the golden mile up there, if you like, of all the wealthy people, and it's the wealthy people who would come to the theater. So having worked that problem out, we worked it out and how we would do it, and it would be a company of 10 people, and who they would be and what place they would be, and we got Gil to direct, but because he was part of the university, he was terrified of losing his tenure or whatever, because he was moonlighting, if you like, on the side, and so we called him David Roy for Davis and King. So that's how that happened. And the Straw Hat Players ran up there. Well, as a matter of fact, there's still a theater company there. It's no longer connected with the original crowd, but there's still a theater company in Port Carling, Gravenhurst.
What was it like, the facilities at Gravenhurst? It was in the...
That's the Opera House.
Were you in with?
The Opera House. And which I think was used as a courtroom as well. It was pretty primitive. As a matter of fact, I think, I don't know whether it was there or at Port Carling, where you had to go outside. You know, you'd exit the stage right, and then you would have to go outside and go enter stage left. Anyway, it was weird. We had that quite a bit throughout the country. The theaters were not just perfect.
you remember your first rehearsals there? Were they tentative, tenuous? Was it all planned?
We rehearsed, we pre-rehearsed everything. We did 4 plays, and they were pre-rehearsed before we left Toronto. And we did an early tour. We went to Minette's Point and Jackson's Point and Beaverton, somewhere else, I think, before we actually hit Gravenhurst. And we played Gravenhurst for, I guess it was half the week, and then we went up and played Port Carling for the rest of the week, like that.
Your first opening night in Muskoka, do you remember that?
I don't remember in Muskoka, but I remember the opening night of the Straw Hat Players was at Minette's Point. And that was terrifying because there was a terrible, terrible storm in the afternoon. And we were expecting a lot of people from Toronto to come and boost it up, and it was the beginning of something wonderful and exciting. And it supposedly was to be sold out, and when this storm hit, which was almost like a hurricane storm, it was frantic, we thought, oh, well, there it goes. Nobody's going to come and see us. And outside the theater was a man with a stall selling pina colada. Oh, God, well, this is all we need. All the way through the show, this yuck is selling this. Well, it was wild. Anyway, it worked. Tons of people came, which amazed us all, and it got off to a very good start.
After the conclusion of the first 2 seasons of the Straw Hat Players, there were road shows throughout the winter, I believe.
At the end of each of them. The first, one of the shows that we did on the first season of Straw Hat Players was a thing called the Drunkard, because I guess we were all terrified that no one was going to come and see us too. And that had been very successful in Montreal, I believe, and in, I don't know, Chicago, I think. And so Brian Doherty had come, who eventually started the Shaw Festival. He came up and he had given us advice, because he was the only really person we knew connected with the theater. He had had a hit play in the 30s on Broadway, Father Malachi's Miracle. So he was our authority. He knew everything, and we didn't know anything. So he had suggested that we do a play like The Drunkard. So when we did it, he thought it was very funny. It had been very successful. I know the other piece we played was Camp Borden, but it had been very successful in our runs up there, and very popular. So he said he would produce or co-produce with the Davises the tours, to take it across the country and down into the States, and bring in 2 song and dance men, one being John Pratt from the Navy Show from Montreal, and the other was Murray Matheson, who came from Australia but via England, and where he had been fairly active in the musical comedy world there. And so those 2 guys did the so-called olios in one, you know? And they would come in and do sketches and things like that. And so we went. They headlined it, and out we went to, well, we were in Montreal, we were in Ottawa and a few other places east of Toronto, and then we went west down into Detroit. We did Minneapolis, but we also did the Canadian centers. And then we came back and we went down into Chicago, and we played the Schubert Theatre there, and we played there for about a month. And then Brian said he hadn't got all his money out from the tour because it was very expensive shooting us. It's certainly not in our salaries, but never mind that. We were having great fun, and so we stayed and we went to the north side and played it there. And then he said, well, he still didn't have it all the money back that he put in. How about us going down to the south side and playing it in a nightclub? Oh, wow. So anyway, we did fine. And we had to join a union to do that. Why, we've never had so much money in our lives. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I'd never made so much money. So, but then it came to the end of the time when we could stay, because we were going back to the second season of Straw Hat Players. He wanted us to stay on. A couple of people did. Barbara Hamilton was in that first company, and she stayed on with him in Chicago. But we went back up, did our bit up north.
How did they?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Change the seat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go talk, actually, think about.
Anytime.
During those tours of the Straw Hat Company, how'd you get around? What vehicle? What mode?
Oh, we were transported by rail, and the rail companies didn't. There was no rates or anything like that for us, and that's one reason why I think Brian Doherty did lose money on it, because of the transportation costs. Because we played to packed houses, it wasn't on that level, and God knows we weren't paid much, but you know, so it was all of that, the cost.
You'd play in many parts of Canada. I mean, you're a big city gal. You'd play in places that didn't even have a street light, you know. These were places that hadn't seen theatre. Could you tell me a little bit about the audiences in the Canadian centres that didn't know theatre from a hole in the wall?
Well, they were great. You know, they loved it. I think, you know, particularly at that time, post-war, every city had people who had been overseas. And they had been to theatre. They knew what theatre was. And maybe, I'm not saying everybody in the city or everybody in the small towns, but there would be a couple. They all knew what it was. Television wasn't in at that point, so I mean, there was nothing there. So, and I think also there were amateur groups existed, so they had been to plays and things. And the Dominion Drama Festival, I remember when we played Calgary, they were quite the company. We met the company of actors who were presenting something at the Drama Festival that year, and they were looking down their noses because we were doing this sort of commercial schlock, in their opinion, and they were doing Hedda Gabler. Gosh, I wish we could. Hedda Gabler. Anyway, it was funny.
You had to sell tickets, though. Do you recall any places that didn't even have a stage, kind of thing?
Yes, but I can't let me think. Oh yes, we played in a number of gyms and in schools. But also, amazingly, we did play in some quite amazing theaters. There was the Dominion Theatre, I believe, in Winnipeg. We played in a huge movie house in Victoria. But it obviously would have been able to accommodate a variety show as well, as so many movie houses did in those days. You know, they could do that. So there was some space there, but it was a huge building. I can't think where we played in. Well, what's the big theater in Montreal? The
Empire, the Royal, the Queen's capital.
Not a movie house. It was a real theater. It was good. It was a beautiful theater. And the Royal Albert here, of course, which was great theater.
Mm-hmm. And traveling, was there any of this family bonding at all when you were traveling?
Oh yes, we were very close. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and we've remained close friends till now.
Let's see, I've got this. I'd like to talk about the tours and the audience you encountered and the challenges of working almost 24 hours a day. We've kind of covered tours and audiences from that period, but working almost 24 hours a day, why would I have this here? Did you work almost 24 hours a day?
Well, I guess so. Nobody could live on that. But I tell you what we did do, we would arrive at a town, we would rehearse, a technical rehearsal. And we would do 8 shows a week pretty well, I think, and but then we would be traveling, and the business manager was unbelievable. If there were 2 trains leaving in the morning, both to arrive at, say, 3:30 in the afternoon someplace, one leaving at 5 o'clock in the morning and the other leaving at 10 o'clock in the morning, he'd book us on the 5 o'clock in the morning one. So we were always up at the crack of dawn and before to get on the train, you know. And who, you know, how much can you sleep on a train? But, yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is a quote from you. "We were ambitious, idealistic youngsters who thought we were building Canadian theatre, and perhaps we were." Did you have that self-consciousness at the time? I mean, we know about the touring companies collapsing, the reasons for that we'll talk about elsewhere. But there was a vacuum. Did you know that? And was there
Yes.
a foundation of theatre going up?
Yes, we did know that. There was nothing. There was nothing of that kind coming through, because we were getting, in Toronto, we were getting touring companies, but they were being cut back more and more. But Toronto was a large enough city to cope with it. And even Montreal was not getting that much, you know, of the Broadway shows that were coming through.
Most of the people you worked with in the theatre at that time, were they people who dreamed of being on stage from childhood, or did they just happen into it?
I don't think any of them happened into it. Yes, I think they would have liked to, but it never occurred to them that he could manage it here. Gil was the one who gave us the idea that, in fact, of course it could happen. Why not? You know?
You went to England, right? Can you tell me why? What you did there?
Yes. I had been, once I graduated from the university, and was working at the Star High Players and then on the tours. And then I'd worked for about 3.5 years old. Then I went to Bermuda, and I was there for 4 months working weekly stock. And that's where you work 24 hours a day, where you rehearse one and play a different show at night. But because I was working stock can get you into some very bad habits. It would be similar to doing a series on television where, you know, you're working all the time, but you don't really have any time to bring new life to your work. You're relying more and more on tricks, on things to get things done quickly, because time is a factor. And I felt that that's what was happening to me. I was, within the stock genre, I was relying on tricks. It would be, you know, fast, fast, fast. And I found out, oh my God, am I doing that again? You know, that sort of thing. So I thought, I would go to England and I would study. And I always, all my life, I've taken voice, and because I've never felt secure about it. To this day, I'm always working on it. And I thought, well, I will go and do, you know, get voice stuff there. And then try to get some work there, which I did. I was able to. Not as much as I would like, but, you know, I was able to work while 2 years I was there.
When you returned to Canada, there was already, the Davis brothers had moved on to the Crest Theatre, and they had that up and running, right?
Well, let me see. I came back in the end of '53 and the beginning of '54. They opened, as did Stratford, I think that year too, opened. So things were happening back in the country.
So did you come back as part of a wave or something?
No, I came back because I was homesick.
And did you
And I am a North American woman, and I realized that. I think I was under the romantic misconception that I was European in femme fatale or some damn thing like that, craziness. At any rate, I am a North American woman, and I realized that when I was there.
And you came to work at the Crest, didn't you? Shortly thereafter.
No, actually, when I came back, I didn't know, because at that point I don't think they'd really set up their full season or anything like that. I came back really to be home for Christmas. Came back in November, and on the way back, came back on a ship. They telegraphed me would I do a television show. So I literally had work when I came back, and that was great. And because CBC had just started up on that.
Okay, could you let's jump to the TV show then, the TV work you were doing then. This was before Summer Lucky, of course. What did you do there? What did you do in television?
Well, different, there would be actually there's so much more drama on during that period of those early days of CBC TV, that there was a half-hour drama, an hour drama, and an hour and a half drama every week, plus variety shows. So it was, which were Canadian, which were done here.
It was busy, like a revolving door there.
Yeah.
So did you feel very fortunate to have had the training that you had?
Yeah, well, that was great. It's unfortunate that they didn't continue it. That it became cheaper to import. That's really what happened. Their budget was being cut right from the beginning. I think once the other networks got going, there was a move to cut back the CBC.
Where were you shooting these shows mostly?
Over here. First Studio 1, and then Studio 7. And they weren't doing outside. We were first on Shumack Street, and on the 6th or 7th floor, I think, of a factory there, and it was fabulous. Fabulous. Because everybody was there on that top floor. The nucleus of the talent in the city at that time.
And in the country, really.
Well, I think we were a little inclined to think in the country, but that may have been unfair.
Did you work with Ted Follows at all on TV in those days?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Do you remember anything about him from those days?
He was part of the Stratford Players. Right from the beginning. He was in the first company. No, I'm wrong. He wasn't, because he was still at college. No, he was. He was in the first company. He didn't go on tour with us because he hadn't finished university. And neither did Eric House, who was a great actor. Eric House is a great actor. And that's something that is not recognized. It should be, because he is incredible.
They were quite a duo, too.
Hmm?
They were quite a duo. Can you tell me about the two?
They're great friends, yeah, great friends.
And Nikki and Ted, right?
Yeah, Nikki and Ted. Yeah.
These early days in television, to quickly hit over that, Barry Morse, did you work with him?
Yes, worked with Barry. Barry was wonderful. He had come over from England, and he'd had a considerable amount of experience over there, and he generally played the leading roles, and but he was also extremely active in ACTRA, and he was a major mentor and guide for a lot of people in the developing industry here. I think one of the things that we did together was...
can we pause, please? Thank you. Where the devil were we? It's a good question.
Oh, it was about Barry. Yeah,
are we rolling, yeah?
Rolling.
Okay.
One of the things I did with Barry was the importance of being earnest. He played Algernon, and I played Gwendolyn, and Andrew Allen. It was his first, I think it was his first, job as a director in television when he moved from radio over to TV. And he had Robert Allen, who was head of TV drama handling the camera part because he wasn't as sure of that.
Okay. We're going to jump back to TV and radio a little bit later, but I think I should get back now to another quote we had here. Professional standards of the Crest were always the highest in Toronto by far. This isn't necessarily true, but this is what it says. Professional standards of the Crest were always the highest in Toronto by far, but the appearance of insouciance, do I have that right?
Insouciance.
Of an in-group having fun always gave the Crest a grown-up little theatre air. Does this mean anything to you?
Sour grapes is what it meant to me, the last part of the sentence. The standards were extremely high. In fact, I would say, because it was run by actors, for an actor, it was the best theatre to work in. I don't think I've ever worked in a theatre as well run from the actor's point of view.
Does that possibly explain the hard times it fell upon?
No, I don't think so. You mean you think that because the actors were treated well, that it fell on hard times?
That it is not managed first, it is managed idealistically perhaps, and therefore it had always a struggle to exist to the real world?
I don't know. Possibly. I think one of the problems that the Crest ran into that people didn't understand was they were often criticized for their choice of play, and because they weren't doing whatever was sharp off the Broadway stage at the moment. You couldn't get those rights as a professional company. Amateur companies could get it because they figured no one would go and see that, but a professional company could not get New York rights. And even British plays were often, when they came to America, what would happen is they would get American rights, and those rights took in Canada, so were simply another state, and we couldn't get them. But that, I mean, you try to explain all of that, it's very boring, you know, and people aren't interested. They just say, you know, why aren't you doing this and this and this? When we were in London, we saw this, and when we were in New York, we saw that. And you should be doing that, and you're not. And then of course, the other argument was they're not doing enough Canadian plays. Well, or any, generally blanket statement, we're not doing any Canadian plays. And that wasn't true at all. They did do Canadian plays. They just didn't draw terribly well.
Okay. So, but it did have a fun atmosphere and all that too. It's sort of a family-like, tight-knit.
Well, I guess I was part of the family, so it may not have been as obvious to me, but certainly the original members of the Straw Hat Players were playing there frequently. I'm sure it appeared as a closed shop to some people. I don't know. I never could quite understand that because, of course, over the years, the 7 years of the Straw Hat Players, under the Davis management, there was an incredible raft of players of all kinds. So and they were also in at the Crest, and depending on what they did, you know.
I also has a quote that the Crest was a commercial theatre in a way the Jupiter wasn't. What does that mean to you?
Oh, the Jupiter went in for art works like Rhinoceros, and what else did they do? But I think they only did about 3 productions before they went belly up, and I think that's what happened, is that they didn't level it, you know, with Rhinoceros as one of the plays and something a little bit more commercial. And it's one of the major problems, I think, to this day about the theatre here.
That was Lauren Green's company, right? Jupiter?
Mm.
Something to do with that.
He was part of it, yes, and John Draney and Harvey Hart, and
These fellows were big on the scene. They'd had a lot of work, newsreels and so forth.
they had a tremendous amount in both radio and television, yeah.
So were they kind of untouchables for you, celebrities that would drive by in long limousines? And
No, nobody ever drove by in long limousines unless they were American imports.
It gave, the Crest, though, did give Canadian theatre workers a lot of experience, right?
Tremendous amount, yeah.
But
I mean, they did some Shakespeare, not much, because Stratford pretty well handled that. They did some Shaw. They did the Chekhovs, and so aside, they did do a couple of Agatha Christie's that unfortunately made them a huge amount of money. You know, you couldn't get a ticket for that, and they're terrible plays, but
they were not activists per se, the Davises, were they?
what do you mean, like left wing or?
No, I didn't mean that. I meant more along art for art's sake. As you were saying about the Jupiter trying more experimental works, New Play Society perhaps was more that way. They were bread and butter, weren't they? More.
I don't know. I think that's unfair. I can't remember anything except for Rhinoceros that Jupiter did, to tell you the truth. But you know, if you had a list of them, I'd say, oh yes, I saw that and it was wonderful. But you know, at the moment, I can't think of it. New Play Society. Oh, they did commercial. They tried things. They did a play of Nathan Collins. I think in order to get him to review them well. Well, too bad. A mistake. No one had read it, apparently. You know.
Yeah, that was embarrassing.
No, but there were several bad plays, you know, and badly done. I mean, I think both theaters had that in common.
How did the company respond to the limited space, the facilities again? If you can tell me what it was like to work at the Crest.
Oh, not bad at all. No, not compared to some of the places or places now that I work in the theater here, you know. But Tarragon is hardly, you know, the Royal Alec. The Royal Alec is something else, you know, but under any standards, Royal Alec is a great theater. It's perfect acoustics, which you cannot say for any other theater in the city. Maybe the Tarragon comes the closest, but that's because it's a small, intimate house. But, you know, backstage facilities are always very primitive. At Stratford, they're very nice, you know, rather like a convention hall.
The Davis brothers, if we can have like a postage stamp thumbnail sketch of what those years at the Crest meant to them, did to them, did it bring them together, did it drive them apart, did it help them, did it hurt them? In a paragraph, how would you say the Crest and the Davises?
Well, they had something that was very prevalent in England at the time, and that was an actor-manager theater. And eventually I think a lot of people wanted to get their hands on it. And when they went to ask for grants eventually, first it was all, the money was supplied by them and their family. But as the expenses rose and famous players kept upping the rent and so forth for the theater, and they couldn't sustain it, and they went for grants. That's when people jumped. They wanted to get it away from them.
You first performed with Gordon Pinsent at the Crest.
Yes, we did The Mad Woman of Shiloh, and but you see, I mean, we did that play. That's a good play, you know. That was quite an exciting production. Kate Reed and Barb Hamilton and Barbara Chilcott and myself. were the four madwomen. Bruno Gerussi was the ragpicker. It was quite a large cast. Jimmy Douglas was in it. Big cast. And I think it was the Globe did an editorial on the excitement of this being able to happen in this city. And these four women together as being something to... I haven't seen that too much.
Yeah, rave reviews, right?
This wasn't a review, this was the editorial. Oh, the reviews were good too. But I mean, you know, that was something else. I was very impressed with that.
What did Gordon play?
He played Pierre, the young boy who is trying to commit suicide, and the madwoman talks him into life, love, and so forth. And
What did you play? What was your role?
I was the madwoman of Chayat.
What did you think of Gordon's performance? Can you describe it as you recall?
Well, he was just sweet. He was adorable. I thought he was about 12, you know. I didn't actually. He was in the process of getting a divorce, and I nearly fainted when I heard that. The director was Leon Major, and who went on to do opera and things. And he ran a company for a while down in Halifax, and I think at the Canadian stage when we were out in California. But I ran into him just recently, and he said, "Oh, I felt so sorry for Gordon." He said, "You laid eyes on him and you set your cap for him. He didn't have a chance."
Was this Canadian stage in California, you're telling me?
No. We were in California. He was at the Canadian stage, and you know.
Leon Major, you worked with him then, eh? So he was sort of an enfant terrible, sort of enfant terrible at the time.
No, he was a kid working with a bunch of old people who knew what they were doing. He is just out of the university at that time.
But he had a way about him, eh? Or was that
He never opened his mouth to us.
Oh.
No, he wouldn't have dared.
Madwoman of Chaillot, yeah. Three Sisters, too, you received tremendous reviews for. Do you remember that production?
Yes, I do. The director had done it. He had been at the what did they call that? The old Vic Theatre School at the New, or something like that they called it. And his thesis had been on Michel Saint-Denis' production of The Three Sisters. So when he came to us from New York, I guess it was, or Boston, he had only 10 days to prepare us. It was a great company. It was a brilliant company. But, I mean, that was something else to prepare that play in that period of time. But he did it so well, and he was geared in the Stanislavski way. But he was a very short man with very, very bad eyesight. His glasses were this thick, and he can't be this close to your face, and he would say, "Now then, what are you feeling at this time when they're saying?" And then he'd run over to them and he'd say, "Now, when you say that, what do you know, and should you be, do you feel like crossing, you know?" And I don't think we had our costumes until we actually opened, or we didn't have all of them. In the dress rehearsal, and we worked till about 2:30 or 3 in the morning. We never did hit the final act. That came as a major surprise at the time, because there are, well, there are 3 sets in the production. There's Act 1 and 2 are in the same, the living room of the girls, the sisters' home, and then there's the nursery, and then there's outside for the final act. And but it was wonderful. It was great.
Sorry, change tape.
Yeah, good.